There are places in this world that appear innocent, even welcoming, yet they possess the power to slowly strangle your soul until you become a hollow version of yourself. Places where your authentic self goes to die, replaced by a mask so convincing that even you forget what lies beneath. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but even more terrifying is to lose oneself completely in places that demand you become someone else. Carl Jung. Onward, thinkers. My name is Mister Halvig, and you're watching The Rational Wise. Carl Jung understood something that most people spend their entire lives learning the hard way. The human soul is not destroyed by grand catastrophes or obvious enemies. It's eroded by the slow poison of environments that demand you betray yourself, bit by bit, day after day. These places don't announce their toxicity. They don't carry warning signs. Instead, they masquerade as normal, necessary, even beneficial spaces in your life. Your workplace, your family gatherings, your social circles, your digital feeds, all potential soul killers disguised as harmless necessities. Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, mapping the territories where the self gets lost. He discovered that we don't just lose ourselves in dramatic moments of crisis. We lose ourselves in the mundane moments of compromise, in the daily negotiations with environments that slowly teach us that our authentic self is unacceptable. You feel it, don't you? That sense of exhaustion that comes not from physical work, but from constantly performing a version of yourself that isn't real. That quiet desperation of living in spaces where your truth feels dangerous. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to journey through Jung's map of the soul-destroying territories that surround us. You'll learn to recognize these toxic places with surgical precision, understand the psychological mechanisms they use to hollow you out, and most importantly, discover how to reclaim your power in each one. This isn't just about surviving these places. It's about understanding them so deeply that they lose their power over you forever. Toxic place. Number 1. The theater of conditional love. The first soul-destroying place Jung identified is any environment where love and acceptance come with conditions, where you must perform specific roles to receive basic human warmth. Jung called this the theater of conditional love, spaces where your worth is constantly measured against external expectations. In these environments, your psyche learns a devastating lesson. Your authentic self is not enough. You must become an actor playing a role written by others. The psychological damage is profound. Your inner critic becomes a director, constantly adjusting your performance based on audience reactions. You lose touch with your genuine desires, emotions, and thoughts because they've been deemed unacceptable by the theater's unspoken rules. Consider the court of Versailles under Louis XIV. Nobles lived in a perpetual performance, their every gesture, word, and emotion calculated for the Sun King's approval. The Duc de Saint-Simon wrote extensively about courtiers who lost themselves so completely in royal performance that they became hollow shells, brilliant actors with no authentic self remaining. Many died not from physical ailments, but from what Jung would later call soul sickness, the slow death that comes from never being allowed to be real. Today's theaters of conditional love are everywhere. The workplace where vulnerability is weakness. The family where certain emotions are forbidden. The social media feed where only highlight reels are acceptable. The relationship where you must constantly prove your worth through performance. First, identify your theater. Ask yourself, where do I feel like I'm performing rather than being? Second, practice micro-authenticity. In small, safe moments, let your real self show. Watch how the world doesn't end when you're genuine. Toxic place number 2, the echo chamber of false certainty. The second soul-destroying place is any environment that offers false certainty. spaces that promise simple answers to complex questions, demanding you surrender your capacity for independent thought. Jung observed that the human psyche craves certainty, especially during times of confusion or pain. But false certainty is spiritual poison. It arrests psychological development by eliminating the productive tension that comes from not knowing, the very tension that forces the soul to grow. In these environments, your questioning nature gets shamed into silence. You learn to accept pre-packaged truths rather than developing your own discernment. Your inner compass becomes dependent on external authorities. The Salem witch trials of 1692 provide a chilling example. The community had created an echo chamber where questioning the witch hysteria became dangerous. People who privately doubted the proceedings were silenced by social pressure. John Proctor, the historical figure who inspired Arthur Miller's character, died not just because he refused to confess to witchcraft, but because he refused to surrender his inner truth to the community's false certainty. His soul remained intact precisely because he chose authentic doubt over comfortable lies. Modern echo chambers are sophisticated. Political bubbles that never challenge your beliefs, spiritual communities that shame questioning, corporate cultures that punish independent thinking, online algorithms that feed you only information that confirms what you already believe. First, seek discomfort. Regularly expose yourself to ideas that challenge your assumptions. Second, practice saying "I don't know" without shame. Uncertainty is not weakness. It's the prerequisite for wisdom. The places that destroy your soul are never the ones you expect. Toxic place number 3, the marketplace of endless comparison. The third soul-destroying place is any environment built on perpetual comparison, where your worth is determined not by your own growth, but by your position relative to others. Jung understood that comparison is the enemy of individuation, the psychological process by which you become who you truly are. In comparison-based environments, you never develop an internal sense of worth because your value is always external, always relative, always shifting. Your psyche becomes trapped in what Jung called the participation mystique, losing your individual identity by constantly merging with or measuring against others. You stop asking, "Am I becoming who I'm meant to be?" and start asking, "Am I better than them?" The Renaissance courts of Italy were breeding grounds for this soul sickness. Artists, scholars, and nobles lived in constant competition for patronage and status. Michelangelo's letters reveal a man tortured not by his art, but by endless comparisons with rivals like Leonardo da Vinci. Many talented individuals of that era never reached their potential because they spent their energy positioning themselves against others rather than developing their unique gifts. They became skilled competitors but failed as authentic creators. Social media has weaponized comparison. Every platform shows you curated versions of other people's lives, relationships, achievements, and appearances. Your feed becomes a marketplace where you unconsciously auction off pieces of your self-worth to the highest bidder. Corporate cultures that rank employees against each other. Educational systems that reduce learning to competition. Social circles that bond through gossip and judgment of outsiders. First, curate your comparisons. Unfollow accounts that trigger your insecurity. Follow people whose journeys inspire rather than intimidate you. Second, practice internal scorekeeping. Set personal benchmarks based on your past self, not other people's highlight reels. Toxic place number 4, the comfort zone of emotional numbness. The fourth soul-destroying place is the deceptive comfort zone, where you avoid all emotional discomfort by numbing yourself, creating a life that feels safe but ultimately meaningless. Jung discovered that the psyche requires emotional range to remain healthy. When we systematically avoid pain, we also diminish our capacity for joy, wonder, and authentic connection. The soul needs the full spectrum of human experience to develop properly. Emotional numbness feels like protection, but it's actually a form of slow suicide. You trade aliveness for safety, becoming what Jung called the living dead, technically alive but spiritually vacant. The French aristocracy, before the Revolution, lived in such gilded numbness. They created elaborate rituals and entertainments to avoid confronting the emptiness of their privileged but meaningless lives. The Marquise de Pompadour, despite her power and luxury, wrote privately about feeling like a ghost walking through my own life. When the revolution came, many faced death with strange relief. Finally, something that could pierce through their emotional anesthesia and make them feel real again. Modern numbness is sophisticated. Endless scrolling, binge-watching, retail therapy, workaholism, substance use, casual sex without connection. Any behavior that consistently helps you avoid sitting with your own thoughts and feelings. First, practice feeling your feelings. Set aside 10 minutes daily to sit with whatever emotions arise without trying to fix or change them. Second, embrace productive discomfort. Choose one activity weekly that scares you slightly. It's often where your authentic self is hiding. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps more than you think. Now let's continue. So far, we've mapped the first 4 territories where souls go to die: the theater of conditional love, the echo chamber of false certainty, the marketplace of endless comparison, and the comfort zone of emotional numbness. You've learned to recognize these places not as external enemies, but as environments that slowly teach you to betray yourself. But these first 4 places are just the foundation. What comes next is more subtle, more insidious, and more dangerous, precisely because they masquerade as positive environments. The remaining 5 toxic places don't just drain your soul, they convince you that the draining is actually healing. Prepare yourself. What you're about to discover might fundamentally change how you see the spaces you've considered safe. Toxic place number 5, the healing circle that keeps you wounded. The 5th soul-destroying place is any environment that profits from keeping you broken, spaces that claim to heal you while subtly ensuring you never fully recover. Jung observed that some therapeutic environments become addictive precisely because they offer the comfort of eternal victimhood. In these spaces, your identity becomes so tied to your wounds that healing threatens your sense of self. The psychological trap is sophisticated. You feel seen and understood, but only for your pain. Your growth becomes secondary to the group's need for your continued brokenness. You become a professional patient rather than a recovering human being. The Victorian era's sanitarium culture created this dynamic perfectly. Wealthy women with nervous conditions were encouraged to see themselves as delicate, broken beings requiring constant care. Many, like the writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman, realized that the cure was actually preventing their recovery. Gilman eventually escaped and wrote The Yellow Wallpaper, exposing how the medical establishment's rest cure was designed to keep women dependent rather than empowered. She recovered only when she rejected the identity of permanent patient. Modern versions include therapy groups that become social clubs for trauma bonding, online communities that reward you for staying stuck, self-help cultures that keep you buying the next solution instead of implementing the last one. First, audit your healing spaces. Ask, is this environment celebrating my growth or maintaining my wounds? Second, set graduation goals. Every healing space should have an exit strategy, a point where you no longer need it. Some prisons are so beautiful, you forget you're trapped. Toxic place number 6, the success theater of empty achievement. The 6th soul-destroying place is any environment that equates your worth with external achievements while ignoring your internal development, creating successful but soulless individuals. Jung distinguished between achievement and fulfillment. Achievement is external validation. Fulfillment is internal alignment. Success theaters train you to pursue achievements that look impressive, but feel empty because they're disconnected from your authentic nature. In these environments, you learn to measure your worth by metrics that have nothing to do with who you actually are. You become skilled at winning games you never wanted to play. The Roman Empire's gladiatorial system created this dynamic on a massive scale. Gladiators achieved fame, wealth, and adoration, but remained slaves. Their success was real, but their souls remained in bondage. Many gladiators who won their freedom discovered they no longer knew who they were. Without the arena's validation, they had achieved everything but themselves. Corporate ladder climbing that leaves you successful but spiritually bankrupt. Academic achievement that impresses others but bores you. Social media influence that brings recognition but not satisfaction. Any success that requires you to abandon your authentic interests and values. First, define success internally. Write down what fulfillment means to you. Separate from what it looks like to others. Second, practice strategic failure. Occasionally choose the path that serves your soul over your resume. Toxic place number 7. The digital democracy of instant validation. The 7th soul-destroying place is any environment where your self-worth becomes dependent on immediate feedback from strangers, creating addictive cycles of external validation. Jung warned about the dangers of living through the opinions of others. Digital validation systems have weaponized this vulnerability, creating what he would call psychological slavery. Your mood, decisions, and self-perception controlled by algorithmic feedback loops. You scroll to feel less, but end up feeling nothing at all. Everyone looks whole on the feed, but no one's really home. You compare your raw self to their edited highlight reel and wonder why you never measure up. The court gossip networks of 18th century Europe operated on similar principles. Reputation could be built or destroyed overnight based on rumors and public opinion. Many nobles lived in constant anxiety about their social standing. Voltaire wrote about the psychological toll of this system. We are all slaves to the opinion of strangers, and in our slavery, we call ourselves free. Social media metrics become proxy measurements for self-worth. Dating apps that reduce human connection to swipe mechanics. Online comment sections that provide artificial intimacy without real relationship. First, practice digital fasting. Regularly disconnect to reconnect with your internal compass. Second, seek depth over breadth. One meaningful conversation beats 100 shallow interactions. You were taught not to feel because feeling was dangerous. Toxic place number 8. The family system that demands your smallness. The 8th soul-destroying place is any family environment that unconsciously requires you to remain small, wounded, or dependent to maintain the system's equilibrium. Jung understood that families are psychological systems that resist change. Sometimes your growth threatens the family's established roles and power structures. In these systems, your healing becomes everyone else's crisis. You were loved, maybe, but never understood. There was a roof over your head, but no safety in your home. Your authentic self learned early that it was safer to hide than to risk rejection. The Kennedy family dynamics illustrate this perfectly. Despite their public success, multiple family members struggled with addiction, depression, and self-destructive behavior. The family's need to maintain their perfect image often came at the cost of individual members' authentic needs. Those who tried to break the family patterns, like Joseph Kennedy Jr. or John F. Kennedy Jr., faced enormous pressure to conform to predetermined roles. Families that bond through crisis and resist individual growth parents who live vicariously through children's achievements, siblings who maintain connection through shared complaints about parents, any family system where your independence feels like betrayal. First, recognize that loving your family doesn't require sacrificing yourself to their dysfunction. Second, practice emotional boundaries. You can care about family members without carrying their emotional burdens. Toxic place number 9. The spiritual community that weaponizes transcendence. The 9th and most dangerous soul-destroying place is any spiritual or philosophical community that uses transcendent ideals to shame your humanity, creating spiritual bypassing disguised as enlightenment. Jung warned that spiritual communities could become the most toxic environments because they use the highest human aspirations to justify the most dehumanizing behaviors. They teach you to transcend your humanity instead of integrating it. In these spaces, your shadow self, your anger, sadness, fear, and doubt becomes unwelcome. You learn to spiritually bypass genuine psychological work by focusing on transcendence rather than integration. Medieval monasteries often created this dynamic. While some produced genuine saints, others created psychologically damaged individuals who confused self-punishment with spiritual growth. Thomas Merton, the 20th century monk and writer, spent years undoing the psychological damage of early monastic training that taught him to see his humanity as the enemy of his spirituality. New Age communities that shame negative emotions, religious groups that use guilt and fear to control behavior, philosophical circles that use intellectual superiority to avoid emotional intimacy, wellness cultures that equate spiritual worth with perfect lifestyle choices. First, embrace your shadow. Your anger, sadness, and fear are not obstacles to growth. They're information about where growth is needed. Second, question any teaching that requires you to abandon your humanity to access divinity. Maybe it's not about being heard by them, but by the parts of you that went silent. We've traveled through Jung's map of the 9 places where souls go to die. The theater of conditional love, the echo chamber of false certainty, the marketplace of endless comparison, the comfort zone of emotional numbness, the healing circle that keeps you wounded, the success theater of empty achievement, the digital democracy of instant validation, the family system that demands your smallness, and the spiritual community that weaponizes transcendence. Together, these places form a complete system of soul destruction, environments that slowly teach you that your authentic self is unacceptable, your inner truth is unreliable, and your genuine needs are irrelevant. But here's Jung's profound insight. Recognizing these places strips them of their power. They can only destroy your soul when they remain invisible, when you mistake their toxicity for normalcy. This knowledge is a blade that cuts both ways. You can use it to protect yourself, or you can use it to manipulate others. Jung would remind us that the goal is not to become invulnerable, but to become authentic. Not to control others, but to stop allowing others to control you. You don't owe anyone your performance, but you owe yourself your truth. You're allowed to leave quietly. Healing doesn't have to make noise. The path forward is not about avoiding all these places. That's impossible. It's about entering them consciously, maintaining your center while navigating their demands, and leaving when they require you to betray yourself. Which of these 9 toxic places resonated most strongly with your experience? Have you found yourself trapped in environments that demanded you become someone else? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more high-value content. Remember this, every time you choose authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, growth over safety, you reclaim a piece of your soul. Every boundary you set, every fake smile you refuse to give, every time you honor your inner truth over external expectations, you become a little more yourself. The world will try to convince you that your authentic self is not enough. Don't believe it. Your soul knows better. Your journey toward authenticity is not just personal liberation. It's an act of rebellion against every system that profits from your self-betrayal. When you refuse to abandon yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Onward thinkers.